YouTube vinyl community, George Harrison fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about George Harrison's the last album he saw in his lifetime release, Cloud 9, from 1987, November 2nd, 1987. This album went to number 8 in the US and number 10 in the UK, which featured the number 1 hit smash single, Got My Mind Set on You. This is an absolutely fantastic album. I know it's one of those albums that's kind of like you read about it, you hear about it, you look at the cover, and you're kind of like, I know this is just a good album, but it's been a while since I really sat down with this thing and sort of went through it, and then put it in a historical context, of course, as well, because that's what we do here at Giggens TV. But at this point in George's career, in early '82 or in the early '80s, around '82, he put out Gone Tropo, or Troppo, however you pronounce it, and that was his last album at that time, before taking a 5-year break in between solo albums, which at that time, is almost like an eternity. It's a long time now, but I feel like back then, with the rate of speed people put out records back in the day, almost yearly, that was a long time. He wasn't just doing nothing. He was doing soundtrack work, he was doing stuff for Handmade Films, which was his film company. He was home with his family, that's a nice thing to do, and just kind of hanging out and having a good time, but he had gotten kind of burnt out with the whole music industry mentality. But by this point in time, he got sort of reinvigorated and came out with some really strong songs, and enough energy that lasted him for the next several years with building up the Traveling Wilburys and doing all that stuff. So the late '80s were a very creative time for him, to be back sort of in the forefront of showing off that, hey, I could do this stuff too. And I really think it's responsible for Paul McCartney putting out Flowers in the Dirt, sort of having a Beatles influence, because this album has some references. He even thanks John, Paul, and Ringo on here. So I think Paul kind of saw this as like, oh, well, if George is doing it, maybe I can do it. Maybe if George is doing it, I can do it. And it's my cheesy Paul impression, but yeah, I really enjoy this album a lot. It's a lot of fun. There's some really well constructed songs. The writing on it is super solid. The playing on it, the musicians are unbelievable. Elton John, Ringo, Eric Clapton. The list goes on. You got some heavy hitters here, man. And this is an original copy from '87. It's got the shrink on it still. It's open, but the shiny shrink is on it. It's got the sticker for contains the hit single "Got My Mind Set on You." So the album opens up with Cloud 9, and I really, really enjoy this song. Hang on a sec. Yeah, Cloud 9. I was reading Devil's Radio first, so I was like, wait a minute, that's not what it is. But yeah, Cloud 9, it's moody, it's groovy, it sounds like George now, at that point. Like he would have said about the Beatles in the 90s. It sounds like them now. It sounds like George now. The biggest difference between this and his early '80s albums is that it sounds like he cares on this one. Like, his early '80s stuff just almost sounds like he's filling out an obligation for a record company to put out music, and it doesn't sound inspired. So I need to go back and do those albums again, because it's been a while since I've really played Gone Troppo and Somewhere in England and that kind of stuff. Because a lot of it for me just never catches my ear, because it just sounds like he just isn't fully invested. This album sounds like he's firing like, hey, I gotta get out there and make some music again. I'm itching to do this. I really want to make something cool. That's what this is all about. And Cloud 9 is just a great song. Great way to open this thing up. His vocals are so articulate, and they take their time. I like the way George kind of phrases his words as he gets them out. And musically, it's a tour de force. It's focused, and you can tell that renewed energy is so playing a part on this thing big time. That energy is just pouring through it. It doesn't hurt that Clapton's on it too. I love his guitar playing. But the overall vibe of this song is just sly, it's slinky, it's cool, it's a really rocking track. Love the way this thing opens. That's what it takes. Classic descending guitar riff. I love that kind of Beatle-y guitar riff stuff. I'm a sucker for it completely. Ringo pounding away on the drums makes you feel like this could have been like an '80s Beatles track if Paul came down to play too. And the chorus is cheerfully '80s. It's got that sort of inspired, chord progression that only the '80s kind of has, which I have a hard time trying to articulate that sentiment. But if you've heard songs from the '80s, I guess you can kind of, It's in the Way That You Use It by Clapton. It's got that kind of vibe to it, I really dig it. Lyrically, it reminds me kind of I Won't Back Down by Tom Petty, which wouldn't come out for a couple of years, but it's got that kind of mentality to it. His solos are seriously classic. George's playing on his solos are so freaking good on this album. This song in particular I love. Clapton joining in at the end I think is great too. Fish on the Sand, I love that imagery of just fish on the sand. It's a wonderful image of, well, not wonderful, but it's kind of like, when you're stuck, Charging riff on this one. I love the chords that change throughout this thing. And it sounds like late 80s rock. It sounds like George is trying to be of the time, which I think is cool. But it's also got a hint of the Byrds on this one, which he was a big fan of. But it's got a little bit of that bird sound here and there. Great background vocals on this one, too. Excellent lyrics. I think the bridge is a lot of fun. Just a classic George song. So we're 3 for 3 here of absolutely smashing songs on this thing. Just for today, unexpected song. Absolutely unexpected from George. It's a beautiful ballad, and he really shows more of a vulnerable voice where he just kind of like sings it out and lets it linger for a bit and just kind of, showcases a little bit of a weariness in his voice. Something he doesn't normally ever do. So it's very cool to have this in his catalog as a track that kind of just shows off, what he's also capable of doing, which I think is great. Elton on piano to help out. I'm pretty sure it's Elton on this one. It's just a wonderful song. The tenderness in his voice is fantastic, and it really makes this track a standout. So that one for me is one of the best moments of this album for sure. This Is Love. This actually, I think, was a single in England, but I don't think it charted too well. This should have been a bigger hit, though. I mean, the chorus is infectious. The verses are so on point. It just nails all the right marks for what a perfect pop song should be. It's a bit sophisticated. There's good drama. There's a lot of caring involved. And I feel like John Lennon would have liked this song. There's something about this vibe. I feel like John would have totally have been on this song if he was alive at that time. Excellent solo, of course. And the string arrangements add a nice cool dynamic, which I find fascinating. But yeah, excellent track. And side one ends with When We Was Fab, the absolutely classic Beatles homage. What more can be said about this song? It's fantastic. It sounds like the Beatles. It's got those I Am the Walrus strings on there. It's got sitars. It's got the background vocals that totally sound White Album-ish. It sounds like the Beatles. It's great. The piano poking on the chorus I think is fun. The background vocals are lively. The swooshing and the backward stuff and the whole, Take You Away, Magical Mystery Tour moment. It's great. Absolutely great. And they did it all. It's such a fun song. And there's very, very quiet talking at the end. If you had your stereo on, turn it up at the very end. There's some voices there, and I can't figure out what they say. But, I'd like to know more about that part. But, fantastic song. It's, those were the days, my friend. Side 2 starts off with Devil's Radio. Man, this one is catchy. I love that sort of call and response, gang vocals chorus that this thing has. It just rips along. It's punchy. There's awesome solos. This could have been a single, too. If it wasn't, it should have. Well, if it was, it should have been. Or should have been a bigger one, I should say. But just rips along. It's so catchy and fun. Someplace Else. I like the chords on this one. It's a little bit heavy, but it sort of harkens back to that 60s pop feel again. Especially with those vocal harmonies. And the overall, sort of song construction here. It's one of my favorites on the album. I just enjoy the vibe that it gives off. And George's slide work is just absolutely phenomenal. This song is a total classic. This one, for me, is one of my favorite songs on the album. Wreck of the Hesperus. Classic horn arrangement here I think is a lot of fun. And George's voice is upbeat and youthful. The guitar work shines through again. The piano playing allows for a little bit of Elton to shine through. Just a very cool song. And again, storytelling works really well with George. And I just like his delivery on this one. So, can't say much more about that one. Breath Away from Heaven. This is a really interesting track. I like how it changes a lot. The progression and the construction of this song is totally something he hasn't played with before either. So I like that this album takes risks and chances and kind of goes places that he knows doesn't normally go. I like how the vocal follows the main riff, and it's a very unique construction. Like I said, it captures your attention the whole way through. It's a standout for sure, how the rhythm changes a lot. So dig that one. And then we end with the classic #1 smash, Got My Mind Set on You. It's a cover from the early 60s that George wanted to do with the Beatles at the time, and who knows if he brought it up or if he did and it just got vetoed, but it was something that had been on his mind for a long time. He struck gold with this one. It totally matches all the marks of a good pop song. It's bouncy, it's catchy, it makes you instantly sing along, which is the true mark of a good pop song. It's lyrically right to the point, musically sharp, and instantly memorable. It works great as a closer. It's a perfect pop song, and it's great that George had a #1 solo song, this deep into his career. And I really think that sort of sparked McCartney's sort of like, maybe I should go to the studio and do something a little more Beatlesy than what I've been doing for the last 15 years. Maybe it's okay now. Maybe it's enough time has passed that I can do it. If George is doing it, maybe I can. But here's the back cover. The guitar there. This Gretsch here is a guitar that he had way back in the early 60s, and he actually got back to do the photo shoot for it. He had it restored and refinished there to take the picture. But this is great. Got pictures of the guys all hanging out. So there's Jeff Lynne, Eric Clapton, Elton John, and George. You got Ringo over there. I mean, this great cast of characters on this thing. Great shot of George again on the back. And take out the record itself on the Dark Horse label, of course. I'm not sure how well it's going to show with the lighting there, but don't worry. Giggens TV is about to get a whole lot brighter and way easier to watch, so the budget has been increased. Not by much. They're not paying me much to do this. In fact, Giggens TV is a free service here, so that's it. This is George Harrison's Cloud 9. Absolutely, I love this album. It's fantastic. It's definitely one of his best. And it covers a lot of ground for some of his best tracks for what you'd find on a greatest hits album. Cloud 9, When We Was Fab, Got My Mind Set on You, Devil's Radio, This Is Love. Half the album is a greatest hits album. So that's it. My name is Giggens. This has been George Harrison's Cloud 9. I'm going to give this thing a 9 out of 10. I think it's a fantastic record. You should pick it up if you haven't heard it before at all, or if you've heard it again, put it on and enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.